Hey Year 7, this is lesson 3 on time, and it's about time zones. Don't know what you know about time zones, but it's how we work out time around the world. And obviously you would know that if it's morning in Australia today, right at this moment, then somewhere around the world it will be night time. Okay, now this is how we work out the times in particular places. Now, when we work out the times in particular places, we have to have a base time or a start place. And our start place in the world is in Greenwich, England, which is, if you follow my arrow, is about there. Okay? All the time in the world is based on Greenwich, okay, and it's either called, the old way of calling it would be Greenwich Mean Time, GMT, alright, GMT at the top, GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, or how we call it now is Coordinated Universal Time, and I'll write that down at the bottom, which is UTC, Coordinated Universal Time. I don't know why they've mixed the letters up as they do, but that's how they do it. So, how do we read the time? It's basically like this. Let's say if it was 10 a.m. in Greenwich Mean Time, and we wanted to know the time in Sydney. Well, Sydney's here. And what we've done in the world is we've split the world up into zones, and because UTC is our base zone, it's at our zero time, Australia is at UTC plus 10, which means we are 10 hours ahead of Greenwich Mean Time. So if it was 10 a.m. in Greenwich, to work out what time it is in Sydney, we would have to plus 10 hours to 10 a.m. Now, if I plus 10 hours to 10 a.m., I would go plus 2 hours to 12, plus 8 hours to 8 p.m. It would be 8 p.m. on the evening of the same day. Okay, so if I said, well, on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time, it would be 10 a.m., it would be 8 p.m. on Wednesday, in Sydney. Okay, so everything on the right or on the east side of Greenwich is going to be ahead of Greenwich. And that means that everything to the west, okay, so I hope we know our directions, it's east here, and it's west here. So anything to the west of Greenwich will be behind the time. So if I said to you, well, if it's 10 a.m. Wednesday morning at Greenwich, what time is it in Alaska? Now Alaska's up in the United States and it's right up here. Okay, so Alaska's here. We look at Alaska, we look at the UTC, and it's UTC minus 10. Which means it's 10 hours behind Greenwich. So if I minus 10 hours from here, it's going to be midnight. It's going to be midnight on Tuesday night. Okay, so just remember, Greenwich is the base, everything to the left is minus, so we have to subtract the time, everything to the right is plus, and we have to add the time. Okay, gets a little bit confusing if I said, well, if I was in Brazil, let's say right here in Brazil, I don't know where that part is in Brazil, but it's a town in Brazil, and that is UTC minus 3. And let's say it was Tuesday at 10 p.m. at night, and I wanted to find out what time it was in Madagascar, which is there, which is UTC plus 3. So the time difference between Brazil and Madagascar would be, well, UTC minus 3, so it's 3 hours up to Greenwich, and then it's another 3 hours to Madagascar, so there's a 6-hour difference. So I would have to add 6 hours to my 10 p.m. here, which would make it 6 hours onto 10 p.m, 2 hours would take me up to midnight, 4 hours to 4 a.m. It would be 4 a.m. the next day, Wednesday, 4 a.m. the next day. Okay, so that's roughly how the time zones work. Now, we're going to focus on Australia for a minute. And look at Australia, we've got 3 time zones in Australia. We've got Western Australia, which is an entire time zone by itself. We've got Central Australia, which is like Northern Territory and Adelaide. And we have got the eastern side, which is Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria and Tasmania. Now, when we look at our time zones, I'm going to slide the map up so you can see a closer picture of the time zones in Australia. Now you can see the 3 time zones. Whoops, that did slip. I want to slide that back. There we go. We have our 3 time zones. There is UTC plus 8, okay, coordinated universal time plus 8, plus 9 UTC, plus 10. But we don't use those exactly, okay? Notice that this is a shaded different colour. Okay, we don't use the 9, we use 9.5. Okay, so that means that instead of South Australia being an hour behind New South Wales, it's actually only half an hour. Okay, so it's a special case that in Australia that we use the half hour, not the full hour. Okay, now let's slide up and let's look at our first question. Okay, very easy question. It says use the standard time zone maps to help us with these questions. When it is 8:30 p.m. in New South Wales, what time is it in each of the following? Queensland. Well, in Queensland, we have the same time zone. Okay, so it would be 8:30 a.m. in Queensland. Now, I'm not worried about daylight saving at the moment. We'll worry about daylight saving in other questions. But at the moment, we're just talking about non-daylight saving time. Now, 8:30 in New South Wales, what time is it in Northern Territory? Well, it's going to be half an hour behind. It's half an hour behind. It means it's going to be 8 a.m. in the Northern Territory. And Western Australia, well, you can see that Sydney is UTC plus 10, Western Australia is UTC plus 8, so that means it's 2 hours behind, which means it's going to be 6:30 a.m. in Western Australia. Alright, second example, it says use the world time zone map to answer each of the following questions. When it is 2 p.m. UTC, find the time it is in these following places. Now remember, UTC is Greenwich in Greenwich, so we want to find the time difference between Greenwich and France. So I'm going to just slide the map across. So Greenwich, as I said, is here. France is here. It's in the same time zone, so that means the time is the same. So if it's 2 p.m. at Greenwich, then it's 2 p.m. in France. Now, Greenwich and China. let's find where China is. All we need to find is the UTC for China. China is right here, and the UTC for China is, if I just expand it out a little bit, it has the number 8, so it's using the 8 time zone, and the 8 time zone is here, okay, which means it's UTC plus 8, so we need to add 8 hours to China. So 2 p.m. plus 8 hours will give us 10 p.m. on the same day. Now Queensland was the same as Sydney, so it's UTC plus 10. So we've got to have 2 p.m. plus 10 hours. Now if we do 2 p.m. plus 10, that will take us up to midnight. So it'll be midnight on the same day. And Alaska, I think we actually did Alaska as well, didn't we? UTC Alaska is in, oh goodness me, we made a mistake. Look at the 9. Look at the 9 there. So it should be the 9 time zone. See that gap there? So we made a mistake. It's not that, it's -9 in Alaska. So it's 9 hours behind. So you need to look at the number in the country, and it will actually tell you the time zone, because the time zones aren't exactly all parallel down the page or down the map. Sometimes they change. So it's 9. So what we need to do is we need to take the 2 p.m. and -9 from it. So -9 from 2 p.m. I'll take 2 hours to get to midday, and I will then take 7 hours to get to 5 a.m. in the morning. Alright, last question. When it is 9:35 a.m. in New South Wales, find the time in these places. Okay, so Alice Springs. Now, remember, Alice Springs is in that half-hour time zone behind New South Wales. So if we take 9:35 a.m. minus 30 minutes from it, and we'll have 9:05 a.m. In Perth, 9:35 a.m. New South Wales, it was 2 hours behind because we had UTC 10, UTC 8, so 2 hours behind. So we have 9:35 a.m. minus 2 hours, and that is 7:35 a.m. So London is of course Greenwich. Okay, it's UTC 0. Okay, so Sydney or New South Wales is UTC plus 10. London is just UTC 0. So we have to minus 10 hours from this. So 9:35 minus 10 hours will give us, it's 9:35 a.m. It will be, well, 9:35, 9 hours and 35 minutes will take us to midnight. 25 minutes before midnight will be 11:35 p.m. the previous day. I'll just write down that the previous day. And then finally, central Greenland. Where's Greenland? Goodness me. Oh, there we are. Greenland is there. So Greenland is UTC minus 3. and New South Wales is UTC plus 10. So let's look at this. UTC minus 3. UTC plus 10. So the time difference between minus 3 and plus 10 is 13 hours. So Greenland is going to be 13 hours before 9:35 a.m. So minus 13 hours from that. If I minus 12 hours from 9:35 a.m., it'll be 9:35 p.m. the previous night. And another hour would take it to 8:35 p.m. Now, these questions will take a bit of practice, I'm sure. But I don't think you should have too much of a problem. I know it's been a long video, but I think it's an important video. So, the only thing I haven't addressed is, well, what happens, just move that in like that. What happens when we get further east and we get further west? Remember, this is on a world, so it wraps around a sphere. So at some point, the east will meet the west, here and here. Well, where they meet is called the international date line. International date line. And if you cross that line, depending on which way you go, you skip a whole day or you add a whole day to your journey. Okay? But that's something we'll talk about another time.